welcome to Crime Divers. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jill.
And welcome to today's episode.
Hello everybody, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks for joining us today. So before we start, we have a few thank yous, as we have a few new Patreons to welcome.
Yes, so we would like to say thank you to Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
To Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
And to Colin.
And thank you, Colin. Thanks for joining us.
Yep, thank you very much, guys. Your support means the world.
It absolutely does.
And if anybody else would want to join them over there, Patreon is just a place where you can support independent creators, and you can, there's different tiers, so you can, get bonus episodes. We have mysterious episodes over there. So yeah, if anybody wants to come over for some bonus content, then it's patreon.com/CrimeDivers.
Yep, and we'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
So, Joe, where about are we today?
We're in the USA.
Okay, and what is the title?
Evil lives here. I was going to say lies here. Evil lives here.
Evil lives here. Okay. Shall we dive in?
Yes, let's dive in. On the 27th of October 1993, the Sheriff's Office in Nevada County, California, received a call from a 23-year-old woman called Terry Knorr. She told them that she had already called other police departments, but none of them believed what she was telling them.
Right, okay.
So she told the officer that she knew about a murder involving a burning body, and she knew what had happened.
Right.
However, this wasn't a recent case. This had happened 9 years earlier in 1984, and the police didn't even know who the body belonged to.
Right, okay.
But Terry said that she knew who the victim was and also who the murderer was.
Right, okay.
So back in we're going to go back to 1984, so when this actually happened. So the emergency services had received a call at 4:30 a.m. from someone saying that they had just found a burning body beside the highway. Mm-hmm. Forensics determined that gasoline had been poured on the victim and set alight. So they determined that the victim was female, and the left side of her face was about the only part of the body that wasn't burned, apart from her back, because she was lying on her back. Uh-huh. She had duct tape across her mouth and around her wrists, and there was no ID on the body. Okay. There were some items next to the body, including some clothes, jewellery, shoes, and a fork and spoon, which is a bit strange.
That is a bit strange, yeah, because I'm like, was somebody eating them?
So there were also nappies, or diapers, as Americans call them, at the crime scene. So investigators guessed that the victim was like a young mother, as she'd had nappies in her bag, and maybe the child was now in danger.
Oh God, yeah, of course, yeah.
Assuming that it had been with its mother at the time, because they thought maybe somebody had took the child.
The child, yeah.
So the entire area was searched, but no baby was ever found, and no witnesses ever came forward.
Right.
A composite photo of the victim was created, but no one came forward to identify her. Mm-hmm. The coroner later ruled that she was alive when she was set on fire. Mm-hmm. No one was arrested, and she was a Jane Doe for 9 years until Terry Knorr came forward and said that she knew who she was. So the victim was Terry's 17-year-old sister, Susan Knorr, and the murderer was their mother, Teresa Knorr.
Oh, I was just going to say, so why the hell did she not come forward sooner if it was her sister, but if it was her mother, then I guess that makes sense. But that's, oh my God, that's brutal if that's true. Yeah,
and I should have said trigger warning at the start. I totally forgot because we were too busy thanking our Patreons. But yeah, trigger warning that there is child abuse in this case. So if anybody doesn't want to listen to that, sorry, I've just wasted 5 minutes of your time.
We'll see you again
next time. We'll see you next time, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so let's rewind back so I can tell you about Teresa Knorr. She was born on the 14th of March 1946 in Sacramento, California. Her parents were Swanee Gay and Jim Cross, and she had an older sister and also 2 older systems from her mum's previous marriage.
Systems?
Did I say that, sister?
Yes, it's 2 older systems.
An older sister and 2 older siblings.
Oh, siblings. It sounded like systems you said. Maybe you said siblings, I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know.
If anybody's listening to this, they're probably like, shut up, Laura, that's not what she said.
Yeah, alright, but it sounded like systems.
Doesn't matter. She had an older sister and also 2 older siblings.
Right.
From her mum's previous marriage.
Got
right.
It.
So if I said something else, sorry. Jim was a cheesemaker, but in the late 1950s he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, so he had to retire, leaving Swanee to keep them afloat financially, with some help from her older daughter, Rosemary. Unfortunately, Swanee died in 1961 when Teresa was 14, sort of going on 15. And they'd been really close, and her mum had actually died in her arms.
Right.
So unable to keep up with the payments on their home, Jim had to sell the family home.
Mm-hmm.
He sunk into depression, and he would like take his anger out and his frustration out on his family.
Mm-hmm.
So Teresa was really affected by her mum's death, and later she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Within a year of losing her mum, on the 29th of September 1962, 16-year-old Teresa married 21-year-old Clifford Sanders, who she had only met a few months earlier.
Okay, that was quick.
Yeah, she dropped out of high school, and the following year she gave birth to their first child, Howard. So, however, the marriage was rocky, and she would constantly be accusing Clifford of cheating on her, and she would get jealous of like anyone that he talked to. She would actually follow him when he went out in an effort to stop him like seeing other women.
Oh, right.
So yeah, she was very paranoid. And
I mean, it's really funny, if you've only met each other a few months, got married, I mean, you don't really know each other, so, you know.
Yeah, but I think it's just, it's a theme, that's just her. That's,
right, okay.
Yeah. So one day in 1964, she reported Clifford to the police for punching her in the face.
Right.
But she didn't press charges. In that spring, she became pregnant. But on the 6th of July, 1964, they were arguing because Clifford had gone out for his birthday the day before, and Teresa wasn't happy because she said that he should have been home with her instead of out with his friends. Which...
I mean, it depends if she planned anything, like a celebration-wise for his birthday.
Well, I think he's perfectly entitled to go out with his friends.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, I just don't know whether was she miffed because it was his birthday and she maybe wanted to spend it with him, maybe? I don't know.
But during this argument, Clifford decided enough was enough, and he said he was leaving, and he turned round to walk out the door. Teresa picked up a gun, and he heard the click of her, like, taking off the safety, so, like, he turned round and sort of raised his hands, but she shot him. And it went straight through his wrist because he'd had his hands up, and into his heart, and just killed him instantly.
Oh, wow.
So she was charged with murder, but she claimed it was self-defence and she pled not guilty. She was pregnant, and she told the court that she had shot Clifford because he was an alcoholic and he physically abused her, even though there was no evidence of any bruising or any kind of marks that would suggest that. Members of Clifford's family testified that he had never been violent or abusive, and they knew that Teresa was jealous and possessive and would rather kill him than let any other woman have him.
Yeah.
But the jury found her not guilty, and not only that, members of the jury actually ran over to her and hugged her.
Really?
Because this poor defenceless woman, pregnant woman, you know, she was just defending herself. So they told her that they were happy that she was away from that heartless monster. So poor Clifford was murdered and was made out to look like the bad guy as well. Like even the jury were like, "Oh, we're glad he's dead because you're away from that," which is
clearly not what was actually happening.
No, so clearly she's very manipulative and very convincing.
Yes.
So the following day, after the court, she went to the district attorney's office and asked for the gun back.
What?
Like, what? Yeah. You've just gone away with murder, go home and maybe lie low for a bit.
Well,
like,
yeah.
What a brass neck.
I know, totally brass neck there, like.
But a psychologist said that she would have seen that as a way to demean the prosecutor.
Right.
Apparently the demeaning of men is a very common pattern in women with borderline personality disorders, and that acquittal for the murder of her husband would have given her a sense of like she can do whatever she wants and without being punished with it.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened, isn't it?
But yeah, imagine what a cheek, like going and asking for the gun back the very next day.
Yeah,
like, you just got away with murder, you're pregnant, just go home and chill and...
I mean, obviously, in times today, that just wouldn't even happen. Yeah. You wouldn't even get the gun back, that would have been confiscated and long gone.
So in March 1965, she gave birth to a daughter, Sheila, and after Sheila's birth, Teresa started going out drinking and dating. But she just used each and every man that she dated, whether it was for babysitting or for money, and then she would move on when she wasn't getting anything out of it, and she'd find somebody else and sort of start all over again.
She sounds a delight, eh?
So, and she would quite happily leave the kids with others while she went out and had fun. So she met a guy called Estelle Thornsbury. They moved in together, but Teresa would often leave him to babysit while she went out drinking. She would sometimes stay out for days at a time, and when Estelle found out that she was having an affair with his best friend, he ended the relationship. So she's got a cheat, because she was, Clifford, she was accusing him.
Yep, and she's been out and
she's the one.
She's personality disorder definitely going on there.
So not long after that, Teresa started a relationship with Robert Knorr. She got pregnant, and they married on the 9th of July 1966 when she was pregnant. Sorry, she was pregnant, and they got married on the 9th of July 1966 when she was 20.
Got their names.
Yeah, I don't know where the pregnant bit came from. She was 20. Mm-hmm. In September, Susan was born, and then William was born the following year, 1967. Then in 1968, they had Robert Jr., but by now the marriage was crumbling. Teresa was back to her old tricks of being jealous and paranoid, accusing Robert of cheating on her. They would physically abuse each other and the kids.
Right.
Teresa still, she got pregnant and gave birth to Terry, so that's the one who called the sheriff's office in she was the one that later called the sheriff's office. Yeah. So she was born in 1970. But by December, so she was born in the August, but by the December, Robert had left, and they divorced the following year, 1971. So Robert tried to see the kids, but Teresa wouldn't let him, and he never saw them again.
Oh, wow.
So now, Teresa was on her own with 6 kids.
Wow.
But not for long, of course.
Of course.
So she married again in 1971. The same year as she just got divorced, and then she was married again.
Doesn't hang around, does she?
No. To Ronald Pulliam. But she would leave him to babysit while she went out partying. Again, she would stay out for days at a time. So, convinced that she was having an affair, Ronald divorced her in 1972.
Jesus.
Her next marriage...
Oh God, is there more?
Her next marriage was in 1976, and that was to Chet Harris. Her daughter Susan grew close to Chet. They had a good relationship, but Teresa didn't like that. Right. And she was jealous, and she filed for divorce after 3 months when she found out that he liked taking photos of nude women. So these photos were consensual, so I'm thinking maybe it was just photography was like a hobby. And
mm-hmm. And I mean, well...
I don't see anything, as long as it was consensual, there was nothing wrong with it. So, but Teresa didn't like it. I mean, I'm not saying that I would like it if that was...
I mean, I probably wouldn't like it either, to be fair.
No, but that ended the relationship, the marriage.
Yeah.
So as I touched upon earlier, Teresa had always been physically abusive towards the children. But after the divorce from Chet, it got worse. So as she was getting older, she felt that her looks were fading, and she was putting on a lot of weight. Mm-hmm. She was jealous that her daughters were young and attractive, and she turned to alcohol, which made the abuse like 1,000,000 times worse. Mm-hmm. So we're going to fast forward to when Terry called the sheriff's office and told them that her mum had murdered her sister. An officer went to the house and interviewed her for 4 hours. As well as her telling him about her sister Susan, she also told him about another body that had been found the year after Susan.
Oh.
So the officer remembered the case she was talking about. A body had been dumped by the edge of a small lake. It was a young female, and she was tied up and in a cardboard box. Mm-hmm. And it was about 6 miles away from where Susan had been found. Mm-hmm. But even though they were only a year apart and only 6 miles away from each other, the police didn't make any connection between them because they weren't similar,
Like the murders themselves were different.
Yeah, because we had a body that was set on fire, this one was in a box, They didn't connect it.
Yeah, because normally if it's a serial killer type thing, they tend to do
the same things, yeah.
The same things, yeah.
So this body wasn't identified at the time either, so for 8 years she was also a Jane Doe. But Terry revealed that this was also her sister, so this was 20-year-old Sheila. So the first one was 17-year-old Susan, and this was 20-year-old Sheila. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, Terry coming forward with this was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Because, she was scared that her mother would find her. And
she was next.
Yeah. Because she did get away from her mum. Mm-hmm. So Terry told the officer that her mum didn't like women, and that included her own daughters. She told him that her mum had been physically, verbally and psychologically abusive towards her and her siblings, mainly the girls. Terry said that she didn't really do much to the boys because she liked them. So Teresa became reclusive after the divorce, and she became reclusive and disconnected the home phone. So the kids didn't have access to a phone, and they weren't allowed visitors and stuff. So is that
why they kind of went unnoticed there, I guess?
Well, this is quite early on, like later on, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So they'd been living in Orangevale, California for years, but at some point, Teresa and 5 of the kids moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in Sacramento. The eldest, Howard, had left home by then. Mm-hmm. She must have let people come into this house because neighbours said that the apartment was filthy and smelled of urine. Mm-hmm. So they also said that the children were never allowed out, and they always seemed on edge, just nervous and anxious. Terry also told the officer that her mum would force feed them, she would burn them with cigarettes, and she would throw steak knives and scissors at them. Now, although I said Terry said that Teresa didn't do much to the boys, well, she didn't physically. Mm-hmm. But from a very young age, she taught them that they had to do whatever she told them, and that included holding their sisters down so that she could assault them with a beating paddle.
Right, okay.
She would also tell them to inflict pain on the girls as well. So although they weren't getting it physically, so Teresa let the boys have after-school jobs, and they were allowed friends over, but the girls were kept inside.
Oh, wow.
On one occasion, Teresa held a gun to Terry's head and threatened to kill her, but she mainly focused her anger on Susan and Sheila. Mm-hmm. Susan was initially targeted because she was the only one who would talk back to Teresa. Right. But as her and Sheila started maturing and becoming more attractive, she was jealous of them. So that's why they bore the brunt of the abuse. Because Terry was a few years younger than them.
So at that stage,
yeah, she was obviously still just at the little girl stage, whereas they were becoming young women.
Yeah.
And obviously the boys, they weren't a threat because they were boys. So, you know.
And then she's not really teaching them very good how to treat women either because...
Well, no, of course not.
That's awful.
So, but also she believed that when she was married to Chet, the last one, he had turned Susan into a witch.
Right.
And that because she was a witch, she had put a spell on Teresa to make her put on weight. That's why she was getting fat.
Oh, for God's sake. I mean...
That's in her eyes. She's like, I'm getting fat because my daughter...
That sounds ridiculous, but I suppose if somebody with a personality disorder might believe that's really, really true.
Obviously she did. Well, yeah. You know, she, in her own words, she said that she was getting fat, and that was because...
Susan was casting a spell.
Yeah, it wasn't because... Obviously, there's plenty of reasons why people put on weight. You know, if they're not exercising as much, they're eating more, they're eating the wrong things. Medical reasons. There's plenty of reasons why people put on weight, but no, hers was a mystical
My daughter's
reason.
A witch.
Yeah. So the beatings got even worse. So after one particularly bad assault, Susan ran away from home. So she was 15 at the time, and she was picked up by police under suspicion of being a runaway and a sex worker. So she begged the police not to take her home, and she told them about the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her mother. She was placed into a psychiatric hospital, and she told the staff there about the abuse as well, because the police didn't believe her. So they're like, we'll stick her in this hospital while we're going question the mother.
Right.
So when questioned, Teresa said that Susan was lying, and that she said she was lying and that she had mental issues. And she made Terry, the youngest, tell the police and the Child Protective Services that there was no abuse going on and Susan was taken back home. So of course, before she had spoken up about the abuse, Teresa... Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back and start that again.
Okay.
Of course, because she had spoken up about the abuse, as I said before, Teresa was absolutely fuming that she'd spoken up about it. So as soon as Susan got home, she beat her, and she made the other children take turns in beating her as well. Oh. She decided to keep Susan prisoner so she wouldn't be able to run away again, and she put handcuffs on her. Susan was handcuffed to the kitchen table, and she would make the other children take turns in watching over her. So Susan had already been taken out. She'd already been taken out of school before this, but now she took the other kids out of school as well.
Right.
So none of the kids got past the 8th grade, which for us I think is like second year in high school.
Right.
By now they had no access to a phone because Teresa had removed it from the house, and they weren't allowed to leave the house. So Susan was kept handcuffed handcuffed to the kitchen table for 2 years, and was only allowed to get up now and again due to pressure sores. Teresa would force feed her to make her put on weight. So because this is her paying her back because she had made her put on weight.
Right.
So she would like make things like for instance, she would make macaroni and cheese, but she would add like big chunks of lard. And if Susan was sick, she would be made to eat the vomit.
Oh my God, that's horrific.
And she also had to wear a gag over her mouth at all times, so she wasn't even allowed to talk or anything like that.
And so she was chained to a kitchen table for 2 years like that?
Yeah, so she would be under the kitchen table basically. She would sleep there and.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
The toilet and stuff.
Well, she was allowed up every so often, so I'm assuming that's when she was allowed to go to the toilet and things. That's child abuse.
Well, yeah, I know it's child abuse, but that's just horrific.
It is, I know.
Jeez.
So there's different. I'm not doing very well today, as usual. Differing. Yes, there are differing accounts of what happened next. One of the sons, Robert, he said that one day Teresa just went on a rampage and was like hitting all the children. She uncuffed Susan and handed Terry a gun to point at Susan, and she was told to shoot her if she moved. Someone dropped a spoon in the kitchen, which caused Terry to get a fright, and she accidentally pulled the trigger and shot Susan.
Right.
But Terry, obviously all these years later, told the police that Susan, her version of the events was that Susan and their mum were having an argument, and it was their mum who shot her. She was shot in the abdomen, and rather than getting her to hospital, Teresa told the boys to carry Susan into the bathroom and put her in the bath.
Right.
She was handcuffed to the bath, and Teresa decided to nurse her back to health in the bath because she was bleeding too much to be kept under the table. Like, she didn't want her carpet ruined.
Oh, right, yeah.
So,
yeah, of course, the bath is the next best place.
Yeah, so Susan was kept in the bath for about a month while Teresa ordered Terry to help nurse her back to health. Once she was better, Susan was moved to back under the table, and she just kept begging her mum to let her leave. She was like, she was begging her mum. She was like telling her that she would move out. She wouldn't tell anybody what had happened. And this went on for a while, but eventually Teresa was like, right, okay, you can go, but on one condition: you let me remove the bullet, because she didn't want Susan having evidence that she had shot her, so she wanted the bullet removed.
Right.
So Susan was desperate to get away, so she agreed. So Teresa gave her antipsychotic drugs and loads of whiskey until she passed out on the kitchen floor. And then with the help of Terry, she got a knife and cut into Susan's back and removed the bullet and then flushed it down the toilet. Can you imagine Terry as well having to do this kind of thing?
I mean, like, the evidence is still going to be there, as in, I know the bullet's not going to be there, but the scarring and the wound on her back.
Yeah, but the bullet, I'm assuming the bullet must have been able to be traced back, because it would have been her gun, and so maybe the bullet could get traced back to her. Right. But if she's just got a scar or whatever, and
I suppose
wouldn't be able to trace that back. Yeah. She could have just been in a fight and somebody's. So Susan woke up in horrific pain. Teresa gave her antibiotics and ibuprofen, but she became lethargic. Her eyes turned yellow, and she was delusional from infection and pain.
Right.
She slipped into a coma. And Teresa told the other children that Susan was just faking it and just to leave her there and step over her. If they wanted to get past, just step over her. So they did. Like, if anybody needed to get past in the kitchen, they just stepped over her body, just lying there. That's awful. Susan lost control of her bladder and her bowels, so Teresa put a nappy on her, a diaper.
Yeah.
Her skin was turning yellow now, and this just convinced Teresa that Susan was possessed by a demon, and that she would have to use fire to get rid of that demon.
Oh my God. Maybe she was just actually, like, dying, needing the medical attention.
At some point, Teresa packed Susan's belongings into 2 bin bags. She put duct tape over her mouth and around her wrists and told her sons to pick Susan up off the floor and put her in the car. She went with them, and they drove to the mountainous area of Lake... is it Tahoe or Tahoe? Lake Tahoe. Susan was still unconscious, but she was breathing. They put her down beside the road, and Teresa told William to pour gasoline over everything, including Susan, and she told him to light a match, and he set fire to his 17-year-old sister.
Wow.
So Terry told...
It's hard to believe that that's even real life.
No, I know.
You know what I mean? It's like you could be telling a story that's just not true, but to actually remember...
It's like a movie.
Yeah, but thinking actually that has happened to somebody, it's just...
That has happened to somebody, and that's happened to that family as well, because, you know, yes, it was Susan that happened to, but I mean, as I said, like, they're all victims, because they're all, you know, she's making them do whatever, you know, and even, like, with Terry having to help her sister, like, imagine having to help to cut a bullet out of your sister.
Because the thing is, I suppose it's probably out of fear, because you don't want it to be you as well, so you do whatever.
Well, they were terrified of her, so that's why they did it.
But I say it's just I'm sitting here going, God, this is real life. Like I'm thinking, it sounds so unthinkable that you just can't imagine that somebody would have to go through that. It's just awful.
It's horrendous. So Terry told the officer that after this, she hoped that the violence would stop. But according to Teresa, the devil had left Susan's body, but it had now entered Sheila's. So the two sons, William and Robert, were made to help Teresa beat Sheila now. She was handcuffed and, you know, the same to the table, the same as Susan had. Teresa started to force feed her to make her gain weight, just like she did with Susan. And one time she actually shoved the spoon so hard into Sheila's mouth that it chipped her two front teeth. Teresa needed money, so she sent Sheila out to do sex work to support the family. But after a few weeks, Teresa accused Sheila of being pregnant and having caught a sexually transmitted disease, and that she had passed it on to her mum via the toilet seat.
Right. Is that possible?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so, though. Surely if you're having a sexually transmitted disease, it's because it's sexually transmitted. Well, yeah. It's not going to be from a toilet seat.
I wouldn't have thought so.
So my thinking is, so has the mum got a sexually transmitted disease then? And if so, she must have been having sex with somebody and she's got it herself.
And she's blaming it on Sheila.
Yeah. Either that or she's just made that up.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but that's what she's accusing her of anyway. Right. So Sheila denied these accusations, but Teresa just kept beating her, trying to make her confess. So Sheila wouldn't confess because there was nothing to confess to. So Teresa hog-tied her and locked her in a cupboard. Now this cupboard was only 16 inches by 24 inches, and it had shelves, so I think it was like a linen closet. So you can imagine you probably just open it up and then you've got shelves inside it to put in your
towels and bedding and stuff like that.
So there wasn't even enough room for Sheila to sit down or to kneel down rather. She'd have to stand. That's how much space there was in it, so she'd have to stand. So she left her there for weeks and told the other kids that they weren't allowed to open the door to give her any food or water. Terry did disobey and she managed to give Sheila a beer once.
A beer?
Yeah, I think that's probably the only thing she could get her hands on. She was trying.
Yeah.
She did try and give her water once as well. She'd obviously went to the kitchen to get water, but her mum had appeared before she could give her it. Sheila would beg to be let out, but Teresa would just turn up the TV so she couldn't hear her. Eventually, to end the punishment, Sheila confessed to being pregnant. She wasn't, but, you know, she was like, I'm just going to say I am, and she'll let me out.
Yeah.
But Teresa said she was lying.
Oh, for God's sake. So 1 minute she's accusing her and she's saying nah, and now that she's admitting it, even though it's a lie, even though she's not, she's now saying that she's lying. Well, obviously she's lying because it wasn't true in the first place. Like she told you.
I know. So she wouldn't let her out of the cupboard. So Sheila died on the 21st of June 1985, they think, because that was the last time that anyone heard anything from the cupboard. There was a loud thud and then nothing for 3 days.
Right.
Nobody, well, the kids obviously couldn't, but like,
she didn't check.
She didn't check. She heard the thud. She didn't check. And she only decided to open the door because there was a horrible smell coming from the cupboard 3 days later. And when she opened it, Sheila's decomposing body fell out. It's awful, isn't it?
That's actually, like, I mean, I know we've covered some pretty gruesome crimes over the last few years, but at the moment this seems to be right up there with one of the worst. So
Teresa ordered her sons to dispose of Sheila's body. So William brought home the biggest box he could find from his job at the cinema. I think it was a popcorn box. Like, obviously, where they buy it in bulk.
Yeah.
And they put Sheila in that. Before leaving, Teresa told Terry to clean the cupboard while they were gone.
Mm-hmm.
They drove to a secluded spot so that they could burn Sheila's body, just like they had done with Susan's. But just as they were about to take, so they'd stopped, they got out of the car, they were just going to the boot to take the box out, when a police officer pulled up behind them.
Oh, right.
So when asked what they were doing, Teresa was like, "Oh, my son's needed to pee, so we're just stopping for a bathroom break."
Yeah.
And even though the officer must have been able to smell the decomposition, but he just told them to move along. So unless he's just smelled something, and well, maybe he couldn't smell it. Maybe he can't smell anything.
True, maybe.
Could be nose blind.
Maybe it wasn't that bad. That I don't know if they were out in the open and the air, the fresh air. Maybe it wasn't.
No idea, but yeah, he just told them to move along. So they got back in the car, drove to a nearby lake and dumped the box there. They didn't set Sheila's body on fire because they wanted to get away quickly, as I think the police officer kind of spooked them.
Yeah.
So they were like, let's just
go.
Dump and go. Well, that sounds awful. Doesn't even just saying that, it just sounds awful.
That does.
And as I said earlier, the police didn't make a connection between the two murders, and the girls' identities remained a mystery for 9 years. Well, 8 years after that, but 9 years since Susan.
Yeah.
So now that Terry had came forward, they got answers to their questions, like, why did the burned body have a gash in her back? So, because they didn't know what that was for. And why were there nappies in her bag?
Yeah.
So, that was because, but I don't understand why there was nappies in her bag, though, because she wasn't going to be able to use them.
Yeah, but then she just gathered up all her stuff.
Well, yeah, she was just, but obviously she gathered up all her belongings.
Yeah.
But
maybe they were just there and just...
I don't know.
Maybe she just wanted to get rid of the, like, stuff to
just
do with
everything,
her.
yeah.
That was just to do with her, so that was just part of it, really.
But what I don't understand is why the authorities didn't believe Terry before.
Well, no.
Why did they not look into her claims? Because she was trying to tell the authorities that this, like, I don't know for how long for, but she had been trying to tell the authorities that, I know there's a... And surely they would have just looked it up and said, oh yeah, there was a body.
Yeah, like, surely we even if we're not sure, we still got to follow it up, surely. Because, I mean, any lead's better than no lead. Especially if these, bodies were Jane Doe's for so long. To have somebody to come forward to suggest who they might be and what happened, you surely have got to take that a little bit serious.
I think... I mean, like, we're not Americans, so, I'm not quite sure, but I do know that, like, with the jurisdictions, with the different counties and stuff like that maybe maybe they have and they've only looked into their county because we're... well, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. So after disposing of Sheila's body, Teresa was panicking in case there was still evidence inside the cupboard that would connect her to her daughter's death, so she ordered Terry to set the whole house on fire.
Right.
So investigators suspected arson, but they had no one to question because the family had ran off and hid in a motel.
Right.
So Terry was 15 now, and she was terrified that she'd be her mum's next victim.
Well, I was just thinking, that's exactly what I'd be thinking.
And I'm sure she would have been.
Cool.
I mean, if she was 15 now, she would have been, blossoming.
Yeah.
Like the other two. So she ran away. She used Sheila's identification, so she managed to pass herself as an adult, so she could support herself. So she obviously managed to get a job and whatever else. So William, he moved in with his girlfriend, but Robert stayed with Teresa for a while before he moved to Las Vegas. But in 1991, he shot and killed a bartender during an attempted robbery and was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
Oh wow!
So Terry, at some point, had attempted to report her sister's murders to the Utah police. And also to a therapist. She was getting therapy. But they just dismissed her stories as fiction. But your therapist, like, why is your therapist not?
Surely you when you go to a therapist, you're obviously there to talk about real stuff and the truth and...
What's the point of lying to a therapist?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's supposedly confidential, isn't it? So even if... But, I mean, did she give him reason to think that it was fiction? I mean...
Well, it sounds like fiction.
I mean, well, I suppose, I've just said myself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to remember that this is actually a real life thing that's happened to these poor girls and obviously the whole family as a whole. So I guess maybe that's what the therapist thought, that was just a story. But I mean, like, it's hard to know because obviously you don't know what mental state Terry was herself. I mean, did she look like someone that was just making up a story or?
No idea, but that's what happened. So the reason that she was eventually believed was because she called the hotline for the TV programme America's Most Wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they told her to contact detectives in the county where Susan's body had been found. So as I was saying earlier, she hadn't phoned that county because well, she mustn't have thought. So that's what I'm saying when it comes to different counties and stuff like that. Maybe if she'd said it to a different county and they've looked in the records and they're like, no.
Yeah, but then surely she would have said, well, it happened here though.
Well, maybe she never got that far. Like, you know, if she's telling them what happened, maybe.
Just like, you know, police, I suppose they're under pressure, so busy. Maybe they just thought, you know, we're not taking this seriously. We've got so many other cases going on. I mean, that probably is the sad reality of it. It's something like that, isn't it?
So unfair, though.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, eventually they looked into it. So now that police had her account of what happened, arrest warrants were issued for Teresa and two of her sons, William and Robert. So they found Robert easily because he was serving his prison sentence for killing the bartender. Mm-hmm. And William was tracked down easily enough. I think he was still living quite local. And because he was living somewhere local and he was working local as well, I think. So William initially denied any involvement, but eventually he did admit his responsibility in both murders.
Right.
When the lead officer asked him why he didn't just say no to his mother, he said, "You don't know what it was like to live in that house with my mother. I had to do what she wanted me to do." Mm-hmm. That question was asked several times during the investigation to him and Robert, and they both said, quote, "That's the way it was." You know, they're just conditioned. They're just...
They just,
Yeah, so William and Robert were both charged with murdering their sisters. Mm-hmm. Teresa was a bit harder to find, but they found her about a week after her sons. She was using her maiden name and had moved to Salt Lake City, where she was working as a carer for an elderly lady. Teresa was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 special circumstance charges, multiple murder and murder by torture. So she initially pled not guilty, but when she heard that Robert had agreed to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence, she made a deal that she would plead guilty on the condition that she didn't get the death sentence.
Right, okay.
So on the 17th of October 1995, Teresa Knorr was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. So she'll be eligible for parole in 2027 when she is 81. The murder charges were dropped against William and Robert, but they were still held accountable. William was sentenced to probation and ordered to get intensive psychiatric therapy for his part in Susan's murder. Mm-hmm. And Robert was charged with being an accessory after the fact in relation to Sheila's murder and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, which was served concurrently within his 16-year sentence. So he didn't get extra time. No. So Robert served his sentence and he was released in 2013. Right. William has a family and is living what he calls a normal life. Right. And unfortunately, Terry died from heart failure in 2011 when she was just 41. Aww. I know, after going through all that in your life, and then you die when you're 41. But I'm glad that she went to the police and
she got justice for her 2 sisters.
Yeah, I'm glad that happened.
And obviously the boys, I mean...
It's hard with the boys because...
you know, it's not really their fault as such in the sense that, you know, their mother was obviously making them do these things and it's easy for us to sit and say, well, why didn't they say no? Why did they just say, no, I'm not doing it? But as they said, you know, you don't know what it was like living in that house in that time. Yeah. So, I mean... They were conditioned to just do what she said. And
they're probably terrified of her because they've seen what she is capable of.
Yeah.
So... you know, the same way with Terry as well, you know, she has seen what her mother is capable of, so of course they're all going to be absolutely terrified of her. Exactly. And, you know, I did watch this documentary, it was something that I seen, there was something that was filmed anyway, I think it was on YouTube, and there was a police officer talking, I think it was a police officer, and he was saying, you know, but surely there came a point where the sons were older, they were bigger than their mum. Why didn't they just say no? But I'm like, it's not that easy.
No, I mean...
Yeah, they probably could have just said no, and if anything, if she tried anything, they would have been able to overpower her. But, as I've just said, they were absolutely terrified of her. They were conditioned.
I mean, the mental abuse that they suffered for years... You know, they just obviously weren't strong enough, or just couldn't. They didn't have the capability. Yes, physically they might have been strong, but I don't think that counts for anything. If you're mentally, you know, if your mental state is you know, overpowered by somebody, then you can be as hard as you like and big as you like. That, you know, doesn't mean you're going to be able to just go, nah, I'm not doing it.
Exactly, and because they never came forward, you know, eventually it was Terry that came forward. It just goes to show how sort of under her control, their mother's control, that they actually were. That even when they were grown up, moved out, one of them was in prison. The other one, you know, I think he had, I don't know if he got married or had a girlfriend or whatever, but they've moved on and they're still not coming forward.
Well, exactly. So,
but of course, I mean, part of that might have been because they were scared of what was going to happen to them, because
they played a part in yeah. I mean, at least with Terry, I mean, she didn't, obviously, other than sort of cleaning up and, you know, witnessing it and stuff like that, she didn't actually do anything horrible to any of her sisters. So, well, unless she was obviously was she made to beat them as well?
Well, it didn't say specifically, but it did say at times that other children were made to participate. So she might have, but you know, as I said, they just had to. They did what they had to do to survive. Basically, that's what they were doing. They were doing what they had to do to survive, so that they weren't next. No. Because if any of them had spoke up, I mean, Susan, as I said, like, she was the one who was quite vocal and would speak it up against her mum, and she was the one who, exactly, she was the one who got tortured and killed, and they'll have all seen that. So
it's just heartbreaking.
It is. It's imagine growing up like that.
Exactly. I mean, sadly, like, in this world, we know too many cases that have happened where kids get, you know, tortured all their lives, or they get locked up and not allowed to go anywhere and do anything. It's just awful.
It really is.
Awful.
You're only here once. And, you know, to have a life like that must be horrendous.
Exactly, and that's it. I mean, you know, obviously some people kind of deal with these things clearly, but, you know, that's no way to act at all. I mean, I'd rather the kids have went in a care or something if that was the case, you know.
Why did she keep having kids?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Why did she keep having them? But then back in those days, I mean, there was no such thing as contraception, wasn't around back then, I don't think, as much, and certainly wasn't as like it is now.
I don't know when contraception was brought in, but they were, well, Terry was the youngest and she was born in 1970, so they were all born in like the 60s. I don't think
contraception was probably, it was either not in existence at that point, or it certainly was in its very infancy of existence. So
shall we Google it, in case we sound really stupid? I know. Well, we're going to sound really stupid anyway, but...
but that is the thing, that's why obviously there's bigger families, isn't there, in those days, because...
It wasn't that long ago, the 60s and 70s. I was born in the 70s, so you can just shut up. I think how she's like, oh, in those days? Really? Yeah. Oh, well, there you go, actually. The first birth control clinic, that's in Britain, was 1921.
Oh, okay. So
that's the USA.
But I still don't think it was, like, as, you know, hard pushed as it is now for contraception. Like, you know, like the pills and... you know, things like that.
No, but it was around because we got, in 1839, the invention of rubber vulcanization, so that led to producing condoms. And in 1950s, there was the research necessary to create the first human birth control pill. And in 1960, that was when it was approved, the pill.
So it's definitely an infancy of being around, so... There's probably a lot of women out there that probably didn't even take it or use it at that point in their lives. So, but yeah, I mean, she shouldn't have been. I mean, it's just awful.
Don't have sex.
No. Yeah, she shouldn't have been allowed all those husbands either. For God's sake.
What is it on? You've seen Mean Girls, haven't you?
Yeah. A long time ago.
Yeah, but is it Mean Girls? I'm sure. Yeah, I think it is. It's in the sex education class, and it was like, don't have sex or you will die.
Oh, lovely.
So there you go. We should have told her that. Don't have sex or you'll die. Yeah. I think it was Mean Girls anyway. I probably got that completely wrong.
I can't
anyway,
say it was or wasn't.
We've waffled for long enough. So thank you to everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.
If you would like to follow us on Instagram, Twitter or Threads, we are crime_divers_pod. We are on Facebook, TikTok and YouTube, and it's Crime Divers Podcast. Our email is crime_divers_pod@outlook.com. Our website is crimedivers.co.uk. If you would like to join our Patreon, it's patreon.com/crimedivers. And if you would like to buy us a coffee, it's buymeacoffee.com/crimedivers.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review.